Now that the market is not so crazy, we're starting to see FHA loans come back into the market. This means that we have to be familiar to use the FHA loan exhibit. So today I'm going to go through 5 key differences in the FHA loan exhibit versus a conventional. I'm Scott DeRider with Housing and Home Group Real Broker. I've been a licensed real estate agent since 2004, got my broker's license in 2006. I'm not an attorney, so don't take this as legal advice. And if you have something, a specific situation that you're working on, please reach out to your broker of record so they can give you their advice and their opinion on all of this that we're going to cover today. The first major difference is that there are not separate finance days and appraisal days in this contract. That's because the appraisal is controlled by paragraph 12, which is called the amendatory clause. So the key difference of the amendatory clause is that it runs throughout the length of the contract up until the day of closing. So if the appraisal comes back and the actual amount is less, the appraisal amount is less than the actual contract price, the buyer can actually terminate that contract up to and including the day of closing. Now, in reality, the same features that you would do in a traditional contract apply, where the buyer and the seller can agree to reduce the price. A buyer can agree to move forward and bring more cash to the table. But the key thing to realize here is that it can happen really if the parties don't agree. That buyer has an out and there would be no penalty, meaning their earnest money would be protected all the way up to and including the day of closing. So the next part I want to point out is that there is something called a mortgage insurance premium. So it's called MIP as opposed to the PMI. Now there's a 1.75% fee that's charged by FHA when one of these new loans is created. Now again, it was 1.75 as the making of this video. So consult your current lender and ask them, what those current rates are. But there's 2 options that you can do with that fee. And considering most buyers are using FHA because of the lower cash required, I think it's the 3.5% minimum down payment, that they probably don't have the extra money to bring up front. So I think most of our buyers are adding that 1.75% dollar amount to the loan amount. And that would be on top of the loan amount that they're borrowing. So again, if you have questions specifically about that, you can consult the lender that you're working with. So the next section is related to repairs required by the FHA. So this sometimes can be confusing as to what repairs we're talking about. So the FHA loan has a separate appraiser who comes out and does what we call an FHA appraisal. In that appraisal, in addition to determining that home's value, the appraiser is going to be looking for safety concerns. Is there a missing handrail? Is there electrical wiring that's exposed? Basically, the government's lending on this property and they don't want to have the borrower harmed in any way. And they're looking after that best interest of the borrower. So the appraiser may come back and suggest, or actually to require certain repairs be done before closing in order to move forward with the sale. So let's just say there was a railing missing and that railing needed to be completed. It would become one of the loan stipulations that have to be satisfied in order to get it clear to close. So in this section, there is a dollar amount and a person who is going to be responsible for those repairs. And just as a best practice, I would never advise my buyer to fix something in a house they don't own. So what we tend to do is make the seller responsible for those repairs. Now, there's also a dollar amount that's have to be added to that as well. So you have to really gauge the house. And now I'm not telling you you're going to be an expert, but if the house looks like it's in really good order, there doesn't seem to be exposed wiring or missing carpeting or some other, element about this house that the appraiser is going to flag, then you can kind of keep this in a reasonable dollar amount. But if you do notice there are things that are going to have to be done. For example, let's say there's no carpet. That is a requirement that a home has to have flooring for the home to basically to be moved into. And you know, carpeting, if it's not throughout the entire house, could be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. You would have to adjust the amount you put in that blank by that condition of the home. So here's how it all goes though. So let's just say you put $1,000 in that blank. And the carpet, let's go with the flooring example, turns out to be $3,500 to repair. So now we have a $2,500 gap. So the seller, per the contract, has the right to present the buyer with an itemized list of how much it is going to cost to complete the repairs. So obviously that first $1,000 was agreed to, was part of the contract, but the additional $2,500 is what's at question. So the seller provides a written estimate from a third-party vendor. Can't be his uncle or his cousin. It has to be from an arm's length contractor that shows that the cost was $3,500 to replace. So the two parties then can agree to work out that cost. For example, the seller can do it all, or the buyer and seller can split it. But here's a really important part. If neither of the parties agree, after 3 days of that seller notifying the buyer, the contract actually is terminated. It's not voidable. It doesn't give the buyer the right. It is terminated. So you have to be aware of these repair issues and really what those timelines are in your scenario. Now, if the buyer and the seller do agree to split it, then the buyer would be reimbursing the seller at closing for those additional repairs. So let's go back to our example. There was the $2,500 overage for the carpet, then $1,250, they decide to split it. That buyer would then need to reimburse that seller at closing. All right, so the next major area that catches people out, this is number 4, is the may be obligated to connect to public sewer. Now, I really wish GAR would simplify this and simply say, if the property is connected to public water and sewer, check here and move on. Or if it's not connected to public sewer or to public water, then the rest of this section would apply. But it's not the way it is, so we got to work through it. So here's the thing. Let's kind of start off by some of the keywords. May be obligated. And then the other one is as required by the FHA. So let's break it down. I went ahead and looked up this code, and it's on FHA's website. It's 4000.1. And I'm going to read this just for clarity. It says that if connection costs to the public or community systems are not reasonable, the existing on-site systems are acceptable provided they are functioned properly and meet the requirements of the local health department. So a couple key things here. One is that the costs are not reasonable. Let's talk a little bit about that. And then 2, that they are in proper working order, they're functioning properly. And then 3, they meet the requirements of the local health department. So let's start off with cost. I went out to the Fulton County website and I said, okay, how much is the application cost for a connection to sewer and to water? And what I found is it varied anywhere from like $2,500 to $3,500 for the connection for the sewer and $2,500 to $3,500 for the connection for the water, just depending on the size of the water main you were connecting. But I said, okay, let's look at a 3/4 inch, which is a standard residential. So right there, there's approximately $7,000 worth of application costs. Let's just say that there's another $5,000 to $7,000 worth of labor and material costs to do the actual connection. That could be somewhere anywhere between $12,000 and $15,000 to connect to the public water system and sewer. So one could argue that that's really not reasonable. Second point here is that the system has to be working properly. Well, what I recommend and what we recommend to all of our agents, that when you do a purchase a home and you're doing your inspections, that you have the septic system inspected by a local septic company. They come out, they pump it, they make sure the drain lines are working properly, and how much sediment's in the tank and all those kind of good things. So if it's working properly, the cost isn't reasonable. The third thing is, does it meet the local health department? So I do know that each county has a permit that you have to secure when you're installing a system. And typically that septic system permit is rated for a numbers of bedrooms and baths. So if in fact you're living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, that septic system has to be rated for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home based on the number of people that are going to be occupying it. So as long as your certificate matches the beds and baths of the home, the chances of the local health department having any issue with it is going to be pretty slim. It's a very rare situation that a seller is going to be obligated to connect a home that is currently on a septic system to the sewer if in fact that system is in the street, which is another little verbiage here. In the street has to be kind of adjacent to the property, can't be a mile away. So for my team members, what we suggest is that we put that the seller is going to be responsible, and we put a cost not to exceed $1,000. All right, so the final section I'm going to talk to you about, the fifth difference here, is relating to condominium complexes. So basically, this real little paragraph, it's actually paragraph number 22, only applies if you are selling in a condo. So if it's a residential single-family home, or if it's a fee simple townhouse, for example, this would not apply. But if you are working on a condo, it's very important to have your lender check to see if that condominium is FHA approved. And each condominium complex has to go through what's called a certification or an application process once every 3 years. And they check their insurance, they make sure they have all the proper documents from the HOA, and then they also go ahead and they want to look at how many loans has the FHA made in that condo complex. So there's a cap on the number of FHA loans they want to see in any one complex. So that's why they have to renew their certificate every 3 years to check on that ratio. So if for some reason the condominium complex didn't renew, has more than the cap, hasn't turned in their insurance and proper paperwork, they may not be FHA eligible. So that all to say, you can go out to this website here, which is called HUD.gov, and come to the page that I brought up here for you, and you can actually go ahead and check to see if that condominium complex is eligible. But as always, good advice, I would have your lender double check that before you guys go too far down the path. All right, so I hope those tips are helpful in kind of understanding the differences between the FHA, finance, contingency, and a conventional. Please be sure to check out my other videos. If you like what you see here, to go ahead and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much.